Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Travel Show with John Guinn on UKHealthRadio.com. It is the 195th travel show on UK Health Radio, and it's my 227th in total since I started the show 5 years ago. And this one's going to be my final one. After 5 years, I decided to move on to past is new. So I'm going to be talking about my very first show, possibly my very second show, the second show as well, because that was a nightmare. And I'll be giving some tips as well to how to make sure that you can continue to get great travel consumer advice, even though this show's no longer on the air. 5 years ago today-ish, I started, but it wasn't the first time I was on the airwaves. I was on a short-lived station called WTF, which stands for We Talk Freely. That was meant to be a 20-minute phone-in session. I ended up being on the show for 2 hours, and I thought I'd covered everything. And then the very last phone-in question was an absolute nightmare. I managed to get an answer, but it put me off doing live phone-ins for life. It was very, very stressful. And then after that, I was a guest travel expert on a consumer stroke fashion show on on Secklow Sounds, community station in Milton Keynes. I was only meant to be on there once. I ended up doing 5 weeks in a row. The presenter was very nervous and she found me a calming influence, surprisingly. So I was there to get her over her nerves more than to talk about travel. But when I did start doing that, I did discover one fatal flaw in my presentation techniques. And this flaw stayed with me over all 126 shows I've already broadcast, and probably on this one as well. I can't pronounce words. I can't pronounce foreign words. I can't even pronounce some English words. I can't pronounce Scottish words. So when you're talking, it can be a real disadvantage because nobody knows what you're talking about. It makes being a writing travel expert a lot easier. As long as you spell the word correctly, it doesn't matter how you personally pronounce it. But there we go. So back to my very first show. It was half music, half chat. I wanted to get myself into the swing of things slowly. So I only wrote half an hour's worth of material and then I played music for the rest. And it started off being a monthly show. This lasted for 6 months and then it became fortnightly and then it became weekly. And if you're thinking about doing not a travel show, but if you're thinking about doing any show on community radio, doing it once a week does take up an awful lot of time. So do make sure you enjoy the subject you're talking about. And travel, I did enjoy it. But I'm doing my Masters in Online Journalism and I'm going to start my second year in October. And I was finding that I was relying too much on my travel contacts when it came to doing the assignments, and I wasn't really pushing myself. So for the second year, I'm going to be doing local news, stuff I know nothing about. It's going to make me build new relationships and ask members of the public questions instead of experts. So that's why I'm giving up. If you are interested in doing your own show, then please do, because I found that I was a travel agent when I started it, and I found that doing this show, I got to meet people in the industry who I never would have met as a small one-man band travel agent, because my sales weren't setting the world alight and I wasn't going to be in to get to meet these people because I wasn't important enough. I wasn't making enough money. But stick a microphone in somebody's face and you can talk to just about anyone. Although over the 5 years there has been one or two have got away. Not naming names, but I did try to get a travel personality. I'm not saying not name his names, but let's say it sort of rhymes with Barley the Doorman. That nearly came off, but unfortunately it didn't. So in the very first show, I was in a studio with a sound engineer, the one and only time I had somebody in there with me. He was making sure all the levels are okay and all the things worked correctly. And I started off by playing a tune called Sunshine on Charlotte. And that came from a CD of steel drums I bought. And I bought this, as I mentioned in the beginning of the show. I bought the CD in St. Lucia, but it was actually published in Manchester. And I had a playlist for the first show. I'm just going to run through it now. So Sunshine on Charlotte, School's Out by Alice Cooper, Holiday by Madonna, Summer Holiday by Cliff Richard, Zorba the Greek, and I wish I could play that one again now, actually. Nightboat to Cairo by Madness. Leaving on the Jet Plane by Peter, Paul and Mary, which did become a outro tune for me for a few years. Staying Out for the Summer by Dodgy. Luton Airport, Ooh Ee Ooh by Cats UK. That took a lot to find, but I managed to find a copy and I played that too. And to round off the show, not travel related, but my skills related, I played Things Can Only Get Better by Doreen. So to start with the show, I've actually dug out my very first script. So I'm going to walk through it now, or talk through it now, and you can see how much has changed or not in the information I've been giving over the last 5 years. You're listening to The Travel Show with John Guinn on UKHealthRadio.com. Before the short break, I said I was going to go through the script of my very first show. But before that, I just want to talk about the Tonight programme on ITV last week. Sun, Sea and Scams. I think that's what it was called. I so desperately wanted to come on and tell you how bad the programme was and how they missed bits and pieces out. And I have to be honest, it was very, very good. One of the best consumer awarding TV travel show things I've seen for a long time. It actually had useful information on it. It wasn't talking about, oh, these people lost their money, let's move on, like some of the shows do. They actually told you exactly how it happened. There could have been a little bit more on how to prevent it. And everything they talked about was preventable if you knew what you were looking for. But unfortunately, a lot of these TV travel consumer experts, they don't actually tell you a lot about how to protect yourself against some of these scams. They only really talk about something when it's gone wrong. I guess there's more money in horror stories and sob stories than there is in actually prevention. I was very close to working on a travel show after giving them some feedback about it, but the production team changed and they dropped me and they went back to how it was. So, as I said, for the whole 5 years, if a travel expert calls the Association of British Travel Agents, mentions the Association of British Travel Agents, walk away, because it hasn't been the Association of British Travel Agents since 2007. It's just ABTA. And that's a clue to let you know that somebody doesn't know what they're doing. They've just done a quick Google search and saw what somebody else has written about the subject. And that other person said the Association of British Travel Agents because they copied somebody else who said the Association of British Travel Agents. It's a big bugbear of mine. So even though the show's finishing, if you're listening to travel media, consumer experts, as soon as they say ABTA means the Association of British Travel Agents, stop listening. Go and find somebody else. And I will be giving you a couple of names to keep a track on at the end of the show to make sure that you are fully up to date with consumer news. One's general consumer, but they do have travel, and one is really travel. But they are both worth following. So anyway, back to my very first show. I was so nervous, and I wrote my script down, and I even had the times it would take me to do the certain bits, so I knew exactly where I was going to be so I could finish on time. But I was concentrating so hard on pronouncing the words clearly, it was incredibly monotone. The sound engineer next to me, I could tell he was dozing off. The only respite of my boring voice was the music I was playing. But even though it was really boring to listen to, the second show was a nightmare. It's the first time I was in a studio on my own. I had to do absolutely everything, the sound desk, recording, making sure the show was streaming and going out. And the interviews I recorded, my very first interviews, they wouldn't play, they disappeared. So I had to ad-lib my show for 40 minutes because that's how much content I had in these interviews to share with people. But luckily, it didn't record because the show recorder didn't work, so I had a chance to go back home and redo it. And I did it all again perfectly. But it was really, really scary. But once that's out of the way and you've had the really bad experience, then it's a lot easier to do. But anyway, I'm waffling again. So let's get back to the script. So let's start off by saying, hello playmates and welcome to my travel show. I'm John Guinn, and once a month I will be bringing you travel news and ideas so you can get the best trip possible. In this show, I will be talking about the simple steps that teenagers should take as they go on their first parent-free holiday, my take on all-inclusive holidays, as well as my views on the current situation in Greece. But first, you may have seen in the news this week that the number of UK tourists being arrested has increased over the last year. Probably all these people had one thing in common. They all believed that the British Embassy or the local consulate would get them out of jail. They soon found out that a UK passport is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. There was a 6% rise in arrests worldwide, probably down to a toughening on drugs and drunken behaviour. Although you can get into trouble for something that's perfectly legal here in the UK. For example, some prescription drugs are illegal in other countries, and even something as harmless as a Vicks inhaler could get you in trouble in Japan. Ignorance of the local laws is no excuse. It's so important to make sure you know what is and what isn't allowed when you're visiting another country. Check the Foreign and Commonwealth Office website and up-to-date guidebooks for details of any local legislation that you may fall foul of during your stay. Especially as some things might not seem so obvious, such as taking photos of railway and bus stations, or even smoking in public. In some countries you'll find drug use is more obvious than it is here. This doesn't mean that it is tolerated by the authorities. Just because the apparent openness that you may be tempted to smoke a joint or take something else, but you may be given more than a total fine or deported. In most years, around 50% of British nationals that are detained overseas are serving sentences for drug offences. Prison conditions can be every bit as awful as you've seen on the television. You may not be aware that you'll also get a criminal record here in the UK if you are caught with drugs abroad. This could have a major impact on your plans for your working life. Remember those rioting last summer? They thought they were going to just having fun and get away with it. Now many are serving time. Although the embassy staff will try and help you with the legal processes, but not give you any legal advice, they will not be asking for any special treatment for you. You will be kept in the same condition as the locals. And you're also unlikely to be ever allowed to go back to that country again. So here's a few examples of the penalties you can face by using drugs. Cyprus has a zero tolerance policy towards drugs and possession, and will usually lead to a heavy fine or even a long prison sentence. Spain, possession of all recreational drugs is illegal, and even the possession of small quantities can lead to imprisonment. Greece and Tunisia, possession of even a small quantity of drugs can lead to long terms of imprisonment. Jamaica, severe penalties for all drug offences, possession or even small quantities can lead to imprisonment